Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome back to another episode of APAC Dialogue with different industry and government leaders and healthcare leaders. We connect on a regular basis. Our guest for today's show is Varun Bhalla, Country Manager of Provenir. And over the next 30 minutes, we would like to speak on different business aspects of Provenir and the roadmap ahead. Just before we start, a brief word on APAC News Network. We are a media organization headquartered out of Noida with a pan-India presence and presence across Southeast Asia and the Middle East. We focus on technology deployment across government, healthcare, education, BFSI, manufacturing, and as well as SMEs and startups. And primarily, today's discussion is part of our APAC Dialogue series. So I welcome Varun again to the show, and we will start. If you can introduce one about your roles and responsibilities, as well as talk about how the genesis of Provenir came about and what are the solutions and services that are currently in the portfolio. Over to you, Varun.
Thank you, Rajneesh. Let me give you a little introduction about myself and my role here at Provenir. I am responsible for building the India and South Asia business for Provenir across India and the other countries in South Asia. We have recently come and launched our business here sometime back in February, and it has been so far a tremendous response from the market as we are going and speaking with various different clients, prospects, and hearing about the different challenges that they are facing in their financial services underwriting process and the ways in which we can solve their problems. Provenir itself, we are about a 20-year-old startup, the way we define it. We have been in business since 2004 onwards, and have been working with earlier on very large organizations across banking, financial services, some of the largest global banks across the world. Moving on to over the last 4 or 5 years, transforming our organization completely into a cloud-native, cloud-led business, working with fintechs, working with startups, and the way we define it as decacons to fintechs is kind of our broad market range which we go with. Our product is an AI-powered risk decisioning platform, which combines the power of data that you normally need for any kind of credit underwriting risk decisioning, along with the AI capabilities which technology today provides us to be able to provide seamless decisioning to financial services customers.
Okay, thanks. Once we talk about the AI-powered decision-making tools, and especially working with banks as well as fintechs, and you said you have moved into this market February onwards. So, how has your reception been in the Indian market? And if you can specify some of the use cases both amongst fintech and banks, especially in the Indian context of these AI-powered tools.
So, so in the India, so I will go by two parts to answer your questions. Right, the first part of the questions is in terms of how the reception has been. The reception has been amazing so far. The conversations that we've had with people here in India across both the banking segment or the larger financial services segment, as well as fintechs who are launching and probably making a mark in the Indian industry. In both these scenarios, the reception has been amazing. The requirements that we are hearing from people has been around various areas in terms of access to data, in terms of utilizing that data in better risk decisioning, and being able to leverage new age technologies to actually make access to credit easier for customers in India. And that's probably been the biggest feedback that we have got back from the market. And going to the second part, in terms of the way things are happening here in terms of solutions, right? The market comes up and talks to us regarding what is your risk to see, how is the global world utilizing the risk decisioning platform, how can we actually bring some of those best practices here in the country. Some of the largest players who globally who have grown across segments like BNPL, across segments like SME underwriting, uh, addressing a lot of the new to credit market in the country. How have those companies done it, and can we actually bring some of our best practices into the market? So it's been a tremendous response back from the market. It's been a very open feedback, as well as a lot more eagerness to learn when we've started speaking here with customers.
So, when you are talking about the AI-powered decision tools, one question is any analytics that is being leveraged, the data, it ultimately will depend on the quality of the data. And since you are involved with fintechs and as well as the banks, it's very wide, disparate sources of data, and in many cases the authenticity and the quality of the data also might be a little bit suspect. So keeping that in mind, and as I mentioned, using AI properly on the data, unless the data itself is not exactly authentic or so, how is that challenge? How do you ensure that the quality and the disparate source of data is authentic and correct enough?
I think that's an excellent question. So one of the things that we came about was a lack of the right kind of data available to financial institutions, fintechs, banks, etc., in terms of building their underwriting, and at the same time utilizing the new tech from an AI perspective. To address that gap, we came up with marketplace. So Provenir offers a data marketplace where today we have closer to about 80 plus data providers on the platform. These 80 plus data providers in essence provide about 500 or 600 odd data APIs, which allows access to all kinds of data across the credit life cycle, whether you talk from a KYC perspective, whether you talk from fraud perspective, or whether you talk from alternate credit perspective. So it's across the spectrum. These providers are people that we work in authenticating in the kind of data that they have available, the depth of data that they have in various markets. So we work globally, and a lot of these providers are global. A lot of those providers are also local in their approach and coverage. So we actually try and cover both the wideness of the data as well as the depth of the data in the various markets that we go with, and before we onboard those players into the data marketplace. So the data marketplace provides a easy access to our customers to get access to the right kind of data that they should be using in their decisioning process, as well as when they go ahead and deploy the AI powered platform. So to be able to utilize the complete power of AI. So it becomes a Provenir ownership, where we bring the right kind of data partners to them. We assist them in selecting those partners, as well as planning their credit journeys on how and where they can best utilize these data partners, and then make sure that they're doing better, that they're making efficient and smarter decisions for their customers.
So, when you're talking about both the uh, width and the depth of the data, and you mentioned those are the best practices you sort of follow in every geography. There are two very pertinent points here with both the width and depth of data. One is on the compliance issue. Different geographies will have different regulations, and you have to conform to those regulatory compliances. The second is the privacy of the data. Again, the privacy of the data, there are different definitions of privacy. So, how do you ensure sort of homogeneity is achieved, both in terms of compliance and the privacy of the data? And in the Indian context, what has been your experience there?
So, Rajneesh, in both the cases, actually, this is a very, very true point for data perspective, right? Where privacy as well as the sanctity of the data becomes very, very becomes a key element of the data usage aspect. and that goes as a key element in our selection of the data partner as well, which is one of the reasons why when we onboard the data partners that we bring in, they are some of the most reputed companies globally, and the ones who follow from a all compliance perspective, from a data privacy perspective, who are compliant, as well as who probably set the standards in the industry from a regulation perspective of how the data should be used in both the privacy context as well as the compliance context. Uh, in any market that we go with, the markets have a normally a very clear definition of how that data needs to be used, and in Indian context as well. While the Indian data privacy law is still in the works, we there are very clear regulations which RBI continues to bring about in terms of the consent regarding the data usage, the data storage regarding the PII data of where it needs to reside, and so on, which is what we work with our partners to ensure that they are complying with all of those specific country-wise requirements. The data is residing in the country. Is there any kind of PII data transfer being going out? Is there a consent mechanism built in regarding the customer consent during the customer journey perspective to ensure that the customer is aware that this data is going to be used during a credit decisioning process, and most likely give them a benefit in terms of helping them get approved for a loan where they would not have gotten approved in a normal scenario had the data not been made available. So all of those information is something which we work with our partners to ensure that they are very clearly communicating to the customers. To a large extent, we are the ones who are sitting in the middle of the ecosystem as a traffic signal, directing data from one end, the supplier, to the user, and it becomes a responsibility for us to ensure that we are talking the right language with both these players.
So, as you aptly mentioned, you are right in the middle of that whole ecosystem, directing the traffic. My question is, when you are talking about that consent mechanism of the information being used, and especially while banks obviously are heavily regulated, there are some question marks in the Indian context about some of the fintechs or the NBFCs uh, that sometimes they are just beyond the regulatory ambit, or there is certain ambiguity there. So, in specifically those cases, since you are working with large number of fintechs, how do you ensure that this consent mechanism, so that that information about the customer uh, is not misused? How do you ensure that from your perspective, as rightly you mentioned, you are directing the traffic signal in that whole ecosystem. So, how do you ensure that?
So Rajneesh, luckily we are sitting, we are in the place where we actually, as you mentioned, as I mentioned, direct the data to large. So we don't really communicate with the customer. Neither do we own the customer, or neither do we own the data. But what we do from our end is ensuring that we select the right kind of data partners who actually follow and all of these guidelines, who are reputable in their nature, who ensure that they do not provide access to that data to anyone without checking whether they have a legal right to access the data. Right? So a lot of the points that you just mentioned regarding fintechs coming up, and a lot of the news in the market in terms of how some of the NBFCs or smaller entities are misusing this data, is largely because where they are trying to extract this data from a customer directly, through either misinformation or through hiding some of those privacy controls behind certain apps, etc. And our large part of focus has been on working with reputed organizations on both sides and ensuring that we work with people who follow that level of quality, and we don't really go and fall in that in or if you don't really go and start working with those kind of customers who actually can misuse this data. The second is, we do ensure that as part of the journey that gets built, which is where an orchestration layer on the platform plays a really key important part, that there are on the specific orchestration layer, there are specific checkpoints regarding whether the consent has been received from the customer, and that becomes part of the journey itself. So in case a customer is giving a consent regarding, and we have partners alternate data aspect, some of the people who use data from SMS and then build credit scoring around it, and especially for credit acquisition for new to credit customers. We work with those kind of customers in ensuring that the consent mechanism is built into the journey itself, and the consent is getting captured before any of the data is being shared by the provider. Right?
Okay, so the first part that you mentioned, the criteria or the parameters for selecting those partners, which basically translates into your go-to-market strategy you follow specifically in the Indian context. If you can elaborate on that.
So, to give you an example, there are today in India, there are three or four different kind of players who are working around this ecosystem. Now, first is when I look at the account aggregator framework, which RBI has released very recently, and under the account aggregator framework, RBI has actually built a complete both privacy framework as well as consent framework on data sharing by the consumers as well as by the banking institutions for any kind of financial usage. Right? Uh, we work with the RBI licensed aggregator on the platform. So the benefit becomes that these guys have already been audited by RBI. They have been given the license by RBI. They have already passed all the checks that are required by RBI regarding the any kind of data sharing between banks and consumers. And we only work with selecting those players, right? So we work with a RBI license account aggregator in India, being from a bank statement perspective. Similarly, on the other side, where today some of the players are helping aggregate data in the industry from GST, from MCA, etc., regarding SME underwriting, which becomes a key important component of ensuring and understanding how these SMEs are behaving and what is their income profile. There we work with with probably the largest player in the country, who's currently being engaged with almost the top 50 players across our financial services institutions. So an engagement with that level of players ensures that that kind of vendor is already audited by some of the largest banking institutions in the country. It is deemed to have followed all the right kind of processes, and those are the kind of players that we bring on board onto our data marketplace.
So, how would you differentiate yourself here from competition? So, if I may ask you to list two or three unique differentiators for Provenir against competitors, how would you define that?
Yeah, definitely, Rajneesh. So this is probably I think we are the only player in the market who is a unified risk decisioning platform. And when I talk about unified risk decisioning platform, we are the one set of people who are amazing at credit risk decisioning regarding the workflow, regarding the business rule engine management, regarding the low code, no code platform from a decisioning layer perspective. On the other side, we bring in our data marketplace, and the data marketplace covers data across the KYC, fraud, risk, as well as credit, both credit bureau-based and alternate database. And on the third side, we are the one people who bring in a platform for building your models, deploying them, monitoring them, and optimizing them. So the way our cycle on the AI works is build, deploy, monitor, and optimize, right? And it is probably the only unified platform that exists in the market. Our competition gets defined as there are people who have data marketplaces, there are people who have risk decisioning platforms, or there are people who have the credit risk model or the AI kind of model, build, deploy kind of platform. But no one has a single platform which combines all of these capabilities, and we address almost an end-to-end journey for a lending institution, specifically someone who wants to go fast, who wants to be agile. Our deployment happens in less than 60 days, which is kind of a dream for most of the banking institutions as well as fintechs who are looking at really fast pace of growth and fast pace of deployment in the market. And those are our key differentiators when we go up.
How would you, if basically you mentioned about three areas, and what I'm trying to get is how do you integrate if, say, one of your customers have one of the modules from another solution provider? So, how would your solution integrate there, and how smoothly will that function?
So our solution is a API based cloud based platform. It's a really simple integration in terms of a direct API integration. It can be, and it is modular in nature. While it is a unified decisioning platform, it is modular in nature. So customers who have some of those components can always plug in additional components from us. So someone might have some data players who they are already engaged with, and they just need to then plug in into our decisioning platform and the AI platform. On and that too on a single API call. So for them, it is actually a really seamless process of integration, a very simple architecture out there, and the rest of the stuff is all managed and run by us on cloud, and where it becomes completely software as a service for them. For our customers, and as they grow in the business, and sometimes people realize that now we want to get additional data sets, now we want to enhance our new risk decisioning process, now we want to expand into newer markets, or we want to expand into new products altogether. And those are the areas where it becomes really easy for them to be able to leverage the stuff that they have already built into the platform and add on any additional, say, data point or credit risk model, ML model or a machine learning model into their process, and bring it all together into a common platform. So for them, it is modular in nature. It is API based. It's a single integration to get access to any module. It's easy to add add-on modules as they grow and as they move forward in their business and in their plans.
And how would your overall solution integrates it typically in the sort of both fintech and BFSI, the use cases that you mentioned? Say this application needs to integrate properly with whatever we say, omni-channel kind of solution, the CRM or the customer interaction thing. So how does that work? That how does that integration work with these other different kind of enterprise applications, which typically your customers would be using?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, our application is API based, and at an API level, it can be integrated at various parts of the customer journey. It can be integrated, say, from a CRM perspective. Maybe it's a CRM Next, maybe it's a Salesforce, maybe it's a Lead Square, or any of these vendors that are there, right? Uh, where when a customer comes on a banking platform or fintech platform, and the customer wants to do, and the platform wants to tell them whether the customer is qualified for a particular kind of loan or not, and that is the stage. So our system can be on an API directly be integrated with any of these CRM or lead management platforms, so that at the lead level itself, the customer gets a communication that yes, he is approved, he is eligible for this kind of loan or not, right? So it saves both the cost and time for both the customer as well as the lender itself. The second aspect, from an omni-channel or any kind of LOS or origination platform, it becomes which is more of a data storage. There it becomes a point of giving a full level of risk decisioning, which including deviation matrices, including the complete life cycle of the credit perspective. So a customer comes into a origination platform. From there on, he moves, his file comes in our platform, which is more like a API, again a single API call, single API integration. So any platform which is API based, for them we are a direct integration. For any platform, in case they are not API based and they want to do a more of a batch processing, or they want to do more of bulk processing based on CSV or Excel files, the platform supports all of those as well. But with omni-channel and similar kind of LOS or origination platforms, it becomes a single API call into our system and run through a complete credit decisioning journey over there, where we pull the data, we collate the data, we massage the data, we do the underwriting, we run specific application scorecards, we tell whether the customer is approved, rejected, or referred in terms of any additional data required from them, which goes back into the origination solution, from where additional data is collected and is brought back into the platform. All of that happens on a single API. Tomorrow, if the banking partner or the fintech wants us to integrate with a loan management solution and give a final confirmation, we do that as well. So we are open to interacting with any kinds of systems which are on API based. We can connect with any kind of databases. So in case a bank has internal database of existing customers on which they want to run a pre-approved campaign, our platform actually connects directly with those internal banking systems, where and we are agnostic to that to a large extent. So whether they are Oracle, whether they're Unix based, or whether they are MongoDB kind of open source platforms, we are agnostic to those kind of platforms, and we connect with those databases. We actually run a complete campaign, run a complete underwriting process or a pre-approval process on all of those customers, and tell the bank who all are eligible for what kind of product, where they should send the campaign through what channel, and where they might get a maximum conversion. So it all helps in optimizing them in their marketing process as well as marketing costs as well. Right? We also work across the customer lifecycle management or a limit management. So once you have onboarded the customer, and the customer is in the bank environment and he's given a first loan, the bank wants to normally see what other loans can I cross sell to this customer, or is there a line or a risk that I'm carrying with that particular customer because of some behavior change. And our platform can actually run a complete customer lifecycle limit management exercise. Our platform actually used to run at that point a complete lifecycle understanding, collection scores in terms of how or which are my most risky customers, which are my least risky customers, and how should I be engaging with those. So it's not only at the time of origination, it actually works across the life cycle, whether it is at the marketing campaign perspective, whether it's origination, or whether it is post onboarding on a customer management cycle. All of those very easily integrable across APIs, across batch files or CSV Excel files, wherever required, across direct connections with databases. So it works across that way. It is really easy to integrate and use.
Any referenceable marquee customers in India?
So there are in India, we are currently undergoing a number of POCs. So I won't be able to name the clients right now, but we are working with one of the largest largest aggregator players in the country. We are working with one of the biggest neobanks, as we define them right now. We are working with a commercial vehicle NBFC on the POC base. So we're working with a range of different players, but not yet in a stage where we can actually bring the names out. Just to add, at the same time, we also work in APAC across probably some of the largest names where we have the marketing rights with people like Gojek, people like GoBeer, Altera, which are some of the largest players in both SME financing as well as BNPL financing across these markets. So enough number of customers around this space.
And within India, what exactly is the infrastructure, manpower, resources? What does Provenir have in India?
So interestingly, India has become a major center for us over the last 6 months as we have started growing into India. Today we have about 15 people in the country who across both sales, marketing, and product engineering. And at the same time, we have very recently taken a decision to build India into our global delivery center as well as global engineering hub. So we will be setting up closer both our global backend centers, which will be serving customers across the globe for delivery services for all the projects, as well as the product engineering center, where we will be doing our product engineering as well as quality testing across the product itself. So India is going to be probably the second largest base for Provenir outside of US over the next 1 year or so, and this has become a major investment hub for us.
So both as the development and the testing center that you mentioned, as well as India itself as a market, you are focusing on both areas, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then my last question would be, if we look forward for the next 5 to 6 quarters, maybe, what are going to be the key focus areas in terms of expansion, adding to the product portfolio, or looking at customers? What are going to be, if you can list down the key focus areas?
So there are three key focus areas right now from a market perspective when we look at India over the next 5 or 6 quarters. First, BNPL and SME, MSME financing remain the key market target segments. From a market perspective, both of them continue to show a huge amount of growth, even in light of recent RBI regulations or directives. But the sectors in themselves continue to show promise, and they continue to be focus areas for us from a growth perspective. I see a lot of our customers coming in from those areas. We see a lot of investment going in from fintech partners over there, and that definitely continues to stay one of our key focus areas. The second is in terms of Provenir itself, building out our base from a global delivery center over the next 4 quarters, and putting up the complete infrastructure over here for both the delivery as well as engineering hub, and beefing up the overall manpower over there. Right. The third is expanding into some of the neighboring countries, and we are seeing a lot of interest coming in from Bangladesh as well as countries like Nepal and Pakistan. But a lot of interest is there, and a lot of the market focus is also coming in. So we are going with a three-prong approach into the market, deeper in the market on the SME and BNPL segments, building our base from both delivery and engineering center over the next 4 quarters, expanding into additional markets outside of India or the neighboring markets within the region between Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, etc., and building out on a base over there.
So, if you talk about the first part, the MSME focus that you mentioned, the point is when you are talking about the data you mentioned, gathering for MSMEs, a large part of the MSME segment in India is still not really very structured. So what that means again is even the data that would come out from there uh, might not be very structured. So as you plan more more ingress into the MSME segment, what are the challenges you expect there, and how to mitigate those challenges?
You're right. So on the MSME side, there is a big challenge in terms of the kind of data that is available. These an MSME, while it describes as one word, there are probably a lot of underlying segments in MSME itself, and it's a varied group of different kind of organizations over there, both small, large, and different kind of sectors coming in together. So data access has been a challenge. What we are doing is we are slowly building on different kind of data access. The government obviously has been really helpful in bringing out the right kind of infrastructure. When you look at the GST availability that has come into the picture, the compliance on the income tax filing, which is expanding rapidly, which gives you a good picture, as well as the growing e-commerce segment, and the suppliers to e-commerce is starting to bring it together from a transaction base, or build together a transaction base for a lot of these MSMEs, combined with the overall UPI transactions, which a lot of these merchants have started to accept and build a history upon. So while it is varied, but it continues to build up really quickly. And what we are doing is we are partnering with all of these different kind of players. Some of the easier ones are obviously the GST and the ITR, which are available from the government sources, so you can actually get a lot more structured response out there. Some of the more difficult ones are through various kinds of partners, and you have to build a coverage over there, which is more around, say, UPI transaction data, or more around the e-com transaction data, which comes through various kind of partner ecosystems, as you go and expand into those areas. And those are the areas which we are building upon. So we have already put in the GST and the ITR kind of standardized data points, but now we are focusing more on building the rest of the ecosystem around UPI transaction. How do we leverage those, and how do we start using those for underwriting and making access to credit easier for these MSMEs? Similarly, how do we actually get access to data around, as they work with different kind of e-com portals or larger supply chain ecosystems? How do we tap into those data sets and bring those into our decisioning ecosystem?
Great, thanks. That was very insightful. really helpful for all the audience.
Thank you, Rajneesh. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks a lot.